The fluorescent lights of Metro Line 7 cast harsh shadows across tired faces at 6:47 a.m. But in the corner seat by the window, Yoonji found her sanctuary, a brief moment of peace before another 12-hour shift began. Part 1. Morning Rituals. Subway car rocked gently as it pulled away from Sinchon Station, and Yoonji pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching Seoul blur past in streaks of concrete and neon. Her reflection stared back, dark circles under her eyes. Her convenience store uniform wrinkled from being worn 3 days in a row, because laundry cost money she didn't have. The city looked different at this hour, softer somehow, as if the harsh realities of daylight hadn't yet awakened. She clutched her grandmother's thermos tighter, feeling the warmth of barley tea seep through the metal. Halmione had insisted on making it despite her arthritis, her gnarled hands shaking as she poured the golden liquid. For strength, she'd whispered, pressing the thermos into Yoonji's palms like a talisman. At 78, her grandmother still believed in small miracles, still trusted that tomorrow would be better than today. The train lurched to a stop at Hongik University Station, and Yoonji watched the morning crowd shuffle in, students with expensive backpacks, office workers scrolling through phones that cost more than her monthly rent, elderly agemas clutching shopping bags. Everyone existed in their own bubble, separated by invisible walls of circumstance and class. That's when she noticed him. He slipped into the car like a shadow, hood pulled low over dark hair, wearing clothes that seemed carefully chosen to blend in but somehow made him stand out more. Designer jeans that looked deliberately faded, sneakers that were probably worth her weekly salary, a face mask that covered everything except his eyes, deep, troubled eyes that seemed to carry the weight of secrets. He took the seat across from her, and for a moment, their gazes met through the reflection in the window. Something flickered there, a recognition that had nothing to do with knowing each other and everything to do with understanding loneliness. She looked away first, heat rising to her cheeks, focusing instead on the thermos in her hands. The stranger became part of her morning routine without either of them acknowledging it. Every day at 6:47 a.m., he would board at Hongik University Station and sit in the same seat. Sometimes he read expensive literary novels with foreign titles. Sometimes he just stared out the window like she did. They never spoke, never even nodded in greeting, but there was comfort in his presence, a shared solitude that made the journey feel less isolating. Yoonji began to look forward to these silent encounters more than she cared to admit. She found herself choosing her seat strategically, positioning herself so she could steal glances at him without being obvious. She noticed things, the way his fingers drummed against his thigh when he was anxious, how he always chose books with worn covers instead of pristine ones, the expensive watch he wore but kept hidden under his sleeve. One morning, she overheard 2 university students whispering about someone from their business program who'd been spotted on the subway. Can you imagine? One giggled, a Chable Heir riding public transport like a commoner. The other shushed her quickly, glancing around nervously. Don't be so loud. You know what happened to the last person who took photos? Yoonji's blood ran cold. She looked at the man across from her with new eyes, noting the careful way he held himself, the subtle tension in his shoulders that spoke of someone always watching over his shoulder. A Chable Heir, one of Korea's wealthy elite families. What was he doing here, riding the same train as people like her? The train pulled into her station, and she gathered her things, sneaking one last look at him. His eyes met hers again, and this time she saw something vulnerable there, almost pleading, as if he were asking her to see him as just another passenger, just another person trying to get through another day. Walking up the stairs to street level, Yoonji felt the familiar weight of reality settle back onto her shoulders. The convenience store waited, with its fluorescent lights and endless stream of customers who looked through her, like she was invisible. Her grandmother waited too, probably already awake despite the early hour, worrying about medicine costs and overdue bills. But for 23 minutes every morning, on Metro Line 7, she shared the same space as someone who seemed just as lost as she was. In a city of 10 million people, that felt like a small miracle. 3 weeks into their silent commute ritual, everything changed on a Tuesday morning that started like all the others. Yoonji had overslept. rushing through her morning routine, while her grandmother clicked her tongue disapprovingly. Eat something. Halmione called after her, but Yoonji was already out the door, running toward the station with her uniform shirt still buttoned wrong. She barely made it onto the 6:47 train, sliding through the closing doors with seconds to spare. Breathless and disheveled, she looked around for an empty seat, but the car was more crowded than usual. Her mysterious fellow passenger was there as always, but today something was different. His usual composure had cracked. He was pale, gripping the seat handle with white knuckles, breathing in shallow, rapid gasps. Yoonji watched with growing concern as he fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking visibly. Other passengers glanced at him with mild irritation or complete indifference, the typical Seoul subway response to someone else's distress. When he suddenly slumped forward, his phone clattering to the floor, she didn't hesitate. Sir, are you okay?" She pushed through the crowded car, crouching beside him as he struggled to stay conscious. His skin was clammy, his breathing erratic. "Does anyone have water?" she called out, but the other passengers had turned away, unwilling to get involved. She pulled out her grandmother's thermos, unscrewing the cap with practiced efficiency. "Here, drink this." Small sips. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. She dealt with her grandmother's episodes before knew how to project calm in crisis. He looked up at her through heavy eyelids, and she saw recognition flicker. There, the morning girl, the one who shared his ritual of solitude. I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Don't apologize, just breathe." She kept her hand on his shoulder, a steady anchor in his disorientation. The barley tea seemed to help color gradually return to his face, and his breathing steadied. "Better," he nodded, attempting to straighten up. "Thank you. I haven't been eating properly lately." The admission seemed to surprise him, as if he weren't used to explaining himself to strangers. Low blood sugar, Yoonji diagnosed with the confidence of someone who'd stretched too many meals to thin. "Happens to me all the time." She didn't mention that for her. It happened because there wasn't always money for food, not because she forgot to eat. The train pulled into Gangnam Station, and she helped him to his feet. "This is my stop," he said, but his legs were still unsteady. "Mine too, today," she lied smoothly. She'd be late for work, might even get written up, but something in his eyes made her decision easy. "Come on, there's a good breakfast place near here." They ended up at a tiny restaurant squeezed between a dry cleaner and a cell phone repair shop, the kind of place that served honest food to working people. He seemed out of place among the construction workers and taxi drivers, but he followed her lead, ordering what she ordered, sitting where she chose. "I'm Daniel," he said quietly, pulling down his face mask for the first time. She'd been right about his face: sharp cheekbones, kind eyes, the sort of features that belonged on magazine covers or drama posters. "Yoonji." She stirred her soup, trying not to stare. Even without knowing who he was, she could sense the careful distance he maintained from the world, the invisible barriers he'd constructed around himself. "You take the 6:47 every day," he observed. "Work." She didn't elaborate, but he seemed to understand. They ate in comfortable silence, sharing the wordless communication they'd perfected over weeks of subway rides. When the check came, he reached for his wallet, but she was faster. "My treat," she insisted, counting out crumpled bills. "You can buy next time." The presumption of a next time hung between them as they walked back toward the station. Daniel seemed reluctant to part ways, checking his phone multiple times before finally looking at her directly. Could I see you again? Not just on the train, I mean." The question was hesitant, vulnerable in a way that made her chest tight. Yoonji thought of her reflection in the subway window, of her grandmother waiting at home, of the gulf between his world and hers that she was only beginning to understand. But she also thought of his hand shaking as he reached for his phone, of the loneliness in his eyes that matched her own. "I work at a convenience store in Hongdae," she said finally. "GS25 on Wasson Road. I'm usually there until 10. His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. "I'll find you." As she watched him disappear into the crowd, Yoonji felt something shift inside her chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. For the first time in months, tomorrow felt like it might hold something other than just survival. Daniel kept his promise. 3 days later, he appeared at her convenience store at 9:43 p.m., browsing the snack aisle with the studied casualness of someone trying not to seem conspicuous. Yoonji was restocking energy drinks when she spotted him, her heart doing that strange flutter that had become familiar whenever he was near. "Can I help you find something?" she asked formally, playing along with the pretense that this was just another customer interaction. "I'm looking for," he pretended to consider the options seriously, "something that goes well with barley tea." Their routine developed naturally over the following weeks. Daniel would arrive near closing time, buying small items he probably didn't need: honey butter chips, banana milk, instant ramen, while they talked in stolen moments between other customers. He learned that she was putting herself through night classes, that her parents had died in a car accident when she was 16, that her grandmother was her entire world. She learned that he suffered from insomnia, that he'd studied abroad but felt more foreign in his own country, that he carried the weight of expectations he'd never asked for. "What do you want to do?" she asked one night as they walked through Hongdae's quieter streets after her shift ended. "I mean, if you could do anything." Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I used to want to be a teacher," he said finally. "Elementary school. I liked the idea of helping kids figure out who they wanted to become before the world told them who they had to be." The longing in his voice made her chest ache. "What stopped you?" "Reality." His laugh was bitter. "Kang Enterprises doesn't run itself. 3 generations of family legacy, thousands of employees, board members who've known me since I was in diapers. Sometimes I think I was born into a cage made of gold and expectations." Yoonji wanted to tell him that cages could be opened, that choices always existed, but she understood the weight of responsibility too well. Her grandmother depended on her income, had sacrificed her own comfort for Yoonji's education. Some chains were forged from love, which made them both stronger and harder to break. Their relationship existed in carefully carved spaces: late evening walks, weekend mornings at hidden cafes, text messages sent between her classes and his board meetings. Daniel never mentioned his last name, and she didn't ask. Content to live in the bubble they'd created, where he was just the man who rode Metro Line 7 and bought unnecessary snacks from her store. The bubble burst on a Tuesday evening in November. Yoonji was alone in the store, studying for her business management exam, when a group of young women entered, their conversation stopping abruptly when they saw her. She recognized the type: university students from wealthy families, the kind who shopped in Gangnam and treated convenience store workers like furniture. "Excuse me," one of them said, her voice saccharine with false politeness. "Do you know Daniel Kang?" The question hit Yoonji like cold water. "I'm sorry?" "Daniel Kang," the girl repeated, pulling out her phone to show a photo that made Yoonji's blood freeze. It was Daniel, but not the Daniel she knew. This was a magazine spread, all sharp suits and confident smiles, with text that included phrases like "Heir to the Kang Enterprises empire and Korea's most eligible bachelor." "We saw him coming out of this store last week," another girl added. "We just wanted to know if he comes here regularly." Yoonji's mouth felt dry as sandpaper. No, I don't know him." The girls exchanged glances, clearly not believing her, but they left without pressing further. Yoonji sat in the empty store, staring at her textbook without seeing the words, her mind reeling with the implications of what she'd learned. Kang Enterprises. She'd heard the name, of course, who hadn't? They owned half the technology infrastructure in Seoul, had their logo on everything from subway advertisements to smartphone apps. The kind of company that shaped government policy, that moved markets with their quarterly reports. When Daniel appeared at his usual time, she was ready for him. "We need to talk," she said, not bothering with their usual small talk. He must have sensed something in her tone, because his face immediately grew wary. "Okay." She locked the store early and led him to the small park across the street, where late-night joggers and convenience store employees sometimes took their breaks, under the harsh lead streetlights. He looked different, or maybe she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Kang Enterprises," she said without preamble. Daniel's shoulders slumped as if she'd struck him. "You found out some girls came by the store. They showed me a magazine article. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew this would happen. His gesture encompassed the space between them, the sudden distance that had opened despite their physical proximity. I knew you'd look at me differently. You lied to me. I never lied. I just didn't tell you everything. Daniel ran his hands through his hair. A gesture she'd learned meant he was struggling with words. Do you know what it's like to never know if someone likes you or your bank account? To wonder if every relationship is just another business transaction. So you decided to find out by deceiving me. Anger flared in her chest, hot and righteous. What was this, Daniel? Some kind of experiment? See how the poor girl reacts when she finds out she's been dating a chaebol. Don't. His voice was sharp with pain. Don't reduce what we have to that. What do we have? The question exploded out of her, carrying weeks of suppressed doubts and fears. I work in a convenience store and live in a two-room apartment with my grandmother. You own buildings. You probably own the building where I work. We don't even exist in the same universe. None of that matters. It matters to everyone else. Yoonji's voice cracked with the force of her emotions. Your world, my world, they don't mix. Daniel, they never have, and they never will. I've seen the articles, the photos of the women you're supposed to date. Do you know what they'd say about me? What they'd do to my grandmother? Daniel reached for her hands, but she pulled back. Yoonji, please, I love you. The words hung between them like a bridge she was too afraid to cross. Because she loved him too, had been falling for weeks without realizing it. Drawn to his gentleness, his intelligence, the way he listened to her dreams as if they mattered. But love didn't change bank accounts or social status. Love didn't pay for her grandmother's medicine or her tuition fees. Love isn't enough, she whispered, the words tearing something inside her chest. Not for people like us. She walked away before he could respond, before she could change her mind, before the treacherous part of her heart that believed in fairy tales could convince her to stay. Behind her, she heard him call her name, but she didn't turn around. The next morning, she took an earlier train. In a city where social hierarchies run deeper than subway lines, where love must navigate between tradition and modernity, between dreams and duty, do you believe some barriers are meant to be broken? Or are there walls that protect us from heartbreak by keeping us in our designated worlds?